And welcome to a small but no less powerful edition of Ben's Junk. The show that's guaranteed to never turn into a blue blob and shoot too quick. Of course, I'm referring to Sonic the Hedgehog, who just so happens to factor quite heavily into today's episode. So, like with the NES and Super NES classic editions that I've covered on Ben's Junk, I'm probably the last to cover this one as well, which is just as well because it's coming from the perspective of, for all intents and purposes, a non-gamer. And keeping with my little unintentional tradition, I only picked mine up as they're seemingly on their way out. So the only difference this time around was that prior to a couple of weeks ago, I was blissfully unaware that this even existed. I mean, I heard about the one put out by AT Games a few years back, but I heard just all around that it was total junk, and I never gave it a second thought. So I just happened to be at Target not too long ago buying some other everyday stuff, toothpaste, deodorant, that sort of thing. And I figured since I was there, I would just take a quick spin through the electronics section. And there I saw this guy, the Sega Genesis Mini. Yeah, had to get the Vanna White moment in there. But it was marked down to $60 from $80. And at first, I thought this was one of those AT Games deals from a few years ago, and it had just been sitting there collecting dust. They're a little slow to mark things down around here. But I figured I would, at least just check out the box. But as it turns out, I still haven't encountered one of those older ones. Not that I'm in a hurry to. But I noticed very quickly that this was a newer product. And best of all, it seemed to be operating in the spirit of the NES and Super NES minis. That, and I had an unused Target gift card just collecting dust in my wallet, so I figured I'd put it towards this. Now, I owned two then-contemporary gaming consoles growing up, the NES and the Sega Genesis. So even if I'm not much of a gamer, I still feel like I'm reasonably qualified to chime in on how it stacks up to the original. And I still have my old console, so I was really able to compare. So obviously, there are only going to be two real holdovers from the original consoles. The controller, albeit now with different connectors, so in this case USB, and the virtual emulation of the graphics. So I'm pleased to report that the graphics are absolutely spot on, just as the same as ever. And really, the only concern I had, which was really minor and I dropped almost immediately, was that from the factory default settings, when you're playing a game, there's some really tacky wallpaper filling out the sides of the screen, because, the games are all the old 4:3 aspect ratio. And I was able to turn that off in the settings, so total non-issue. Now, as for the controller, like the NES and SNES minis, the dimensions are perfect. But they feel a little thinner and lighter and not quite as robust as the originals. But at the same time, as best as I can feel, the performance is about the same. But I did notice, going back to the whole robust thing, that there's some dead space in the newer ones. So you might notice the buttons kind of jiggle when I tap on the controller, and it kind of rattles a little. So let me hold up my mic and I'll give both of these controllers a shake. So the original, real good and solid, and the new, a little cheaper. But as I said, as far as performance goes, I can't really tell a difference. Now, the console, if you will, is a reproduction of the original late 80s Sega Genesis model. So it's not the one that I had. Mine's a Model 2. But it is complete with a cartridge slot and a headphone volume control. Neither of them do anything. They're just there for show, but it's nice. And of course, there's no headphone jack on this either. But I did notice that the reset button actually works. It helps you get back to the menu. So I just found myself instinctively diving for it when I wanted to quit a game or start over or whatever. Now, of course, this being a modern thing, it is preloaded with the games, which it doesn't bug me, but I would have liked to have seen, since they opened the slot anyway, it would have been nice to leave the door open for more games, like have a USB port down there and maybe put out an expansion pack at some point, license some more games and get a little more mileage out of this, but I'm guessing Sega just wanted this to be a one-off. Now, there is some not-so-good stuff about this. So, despite a very generous 42 games, more than either of the Nintendo Minis, there are some rather baffling omissions here. So, for example, Sonic the Hedgehog, effectively Sega's flagship game. You'd think, if I'm not mistaken, Sega created those games, so by turn they would own the rights, so they wouldn't have to license anything, and you'd think they would have put all the Sonic games on here. Nope. So I used to have a copy of Sonic 3 as a kid, which I foolishly ultimately sold off, which would have been nice to revisit, and I haven't played it in over 20 years, but alas, that game is not here. Now, I knew full well that, legally speaking, a Sega's greatest hits thing was just probably not gonna happen. So, for example, I would have really liked NBA Jam on here, the only sports game I've ever really liked. But at the time, they had to license the likenesses of all those players, so I would imagine they'd have to renegotiate all that at this point. So, yeah, I get why that's not there. But anyway, getting back to the more techie stuff, as for the hookups, it is 100% HDMI. Totally modern. So this is not intended to be hooked up to, an old tube TV. And so the pillar boxing, the sides of the widescreen, are a moot point. But oddly enough, conversely, you can stretch out your 4:3 aspect ratio game to full widescreen. So Sonic looks like he's eaten 1,000 of his chili dogs, I guess. Anyway, let's hook this up and we'll do that demo thing. Alright, I've had to settle for just the good old-fashioned pointing the camcorder at the TV for this one, for two reasons. One, I just don't have any great means of not only getting a direct feed, but also being able to talk over it in real time. And also, because, on an unrelated note, if you're wondering why I haven't finished the history of VHS yet, if you're a regular archive viewer, it's because I haven't come across quite that right method of capturing footage via HDMI and component. And I kind of need that. I certainly need component. So, yeah, the practical thing for me at the moment is just to point the camcorder at the TV. So, of course, we are at the menu right now, and it is completely nicely, neatly arranged. Although the controls are a little slippery, I can kind of hold down the button and it just blazes through everything. But if you just give it a little tap, the arrow keys, it's just fine. So just don't lean on it. But anyway, I'm going to try and keep the game footage to a relative minimum here. And really, I have tried out most of these games. Only a few of these, only I think 2 of these I ever owned, and only maybe about 4 or 5 of them I ever rented at the time. So I'm going to try and keep things in fairly familiar and or simple territory here, but let's do just a bit of what was the pack-in title when I got my Genesis, my first Genesis, back in 1993, and that is Sonic the Hedgehog 2. And it's not going to be pretty. I'm just going to try and blaze through the first level just to give you an idea. I'm going to keep my little microphone in front of me. It'll be a bit distant, but hopefully you can still hear me. I'll try and speak up. But and I'll try and give you a little volume as well, just to have it leak in a little. It's nothing special. And of course, once you hear the familiar Sonic theme, you probably know it anyway. So let's get going here. Okay. So hopefully we can stay in YouTube's good graces. Good thing gameplay footage is, kind of ephemeral. It's unique every time. So I don't know why I'm getting any of these extra rings. Habit. And I played this game endlessly as a kid, and I still never beat it. So, some folks are probably just going to laugh their butts off at me at this. But I will say on a technical note here that of course, you're going to want to keep things in game mode on your TV so there's no lag, because it will lag if you try and have any special settings, which I'm known to do, so I always have to remember that part. But I haven't noticed any dropped frames. Everything's been real nice and smooth and just the way I remember it and the way I'm able to revisit it now with my old console. Only thing I've noticed here is I used to be able to make Sonic come back and do a little dance by my own hand when I would pass the sign. But I have not been able to do that again. I don't know if that was just a glitch at the time, and looks like I came just 2 rings shy of an extra life there. Oh well. But anyway, let me hit that reset button. We'll come out of that, back to the main menu. And it lets you save your gameplay for seemingly any game, I've noticed, which is nice. So let me kill the volume here. I've noticed playing this, some memories coming back. So let me grab the mic here. Street Fighter 2. I never owned it, but I had friends that just loved the Street Fighter games, and I never got it. I found it totally perplexing then, and I still do today. And it played just the way I remembered it. Either I am getting my butt kicked by my opponent, and I'm not going to sample it here for violence reasons, but I'd be getting my butt kicked by my opponent, or I'd be kicking my opponent's butt. And there was nothing in between. So the gameplay just never quite made sense to me, and I'm sure somebody will give me an earful over that. But there's some other ones that I remember at least renting at the time. Earthworm Jim, which didn't do a lot for me then, and it doesn't really do a lot for me now. Echo the Dolphin, I never got, and I still don't understand it. And I guess for our last little bit of gameplay, we'll do a game, kind of a Tetris clone. And there's actually a Tetris on here, which I guess did not get released at the time, but it's one of those collector enticement things. But it is called Columns. Never saw it at the time. This is the first time I ever encountered this game. And it seems like kind of a precursor to those games that people play on their smartphones these days. So I'll just, I'll bring up a little bit of this. I'll give it a touch of volume. And we'll get started here. So the name of the game is to get 3 of a like-colored jewel, gem, whatever they are, jewels it says on the screen, to line up, and you make some points, and it's, again, just kind of a Tetris clone. So it looks like I can do that right out of the gate. And I can also change the order of the jewels. So I was able to get 4 in a row there. And I'll rearrange the order of the jewels so they're hopefully right. Yeah. So hopefully you get the idea. But as I've said, everything seems to work on a technical level. Everything was perfectly enjoyable to me. And last word on this thing, is it as good as an original Genesis? No. But it's close enough. Certainly just for a little casual gameplay, just in the name of convenience, it does its job well. You can quickly, easily hook it up to a modern TV and play some old school games with hardly any muss or fuss. And for that, for what it is, keeping that in mind, I'm calling it a winner. So, with that, that is it for this installment of Ben's Junk. I will talk to you again soon.